Have you ever wondered if there's something in Jesus' teachings that you've never been told? What if the teachings you know are just the tip of a massive iceberg? In this video, we're going to dive deep into the hidden teachings of Jesus, those that have been concealed for centuries, and reveal how this lost wisdom could be the key to your spiritual awakening. Imagine if everything you've heard about love, forgiveness, and connection with the divine was just the beginning of a much more powerful journey. By watching until the end, you'll discover how Jesus' teachings can completely transform the way you relate to the universe, bringing peace, clarity, and a new sense of purpose to your life. If you are searching for answers to deep questions or feeling lost, as if something is missing in your spiritual path, this video might be just what you need. So, are you ready to uncover the secrets that could change your life? The letter Pontius Pilate wrote to Emperor Tiberius about Jesus contains surprising details about his appearance, things not even the Gospels mention. In this letter, Pilate also describes Jesus' miracles, his trial, crucifixion, and believe it or not, even his resurrection. But what exactly did Pilate tell the emperor about the resurrection of the Son of God and his physical appearance? Pilate begins the letter to Emperor Tiberius Caesar with greetings and reports. Your Majesty, recent events in my province have been so extraordinary that I felt the need to report everything in detail, as I believe these events may influence the future of our nation. It seems as though lately all the gods have abandoned us. I am almost ready to claim it was a day of ill fortune when I succeeded Valerius in governing Judea, for my life has since been full of worries and anguish. He goes on to describe how, upon arriving in Jerusalem and assuming command of the praetorium, he organized a large banquet to which he invited the Tetrarch of Galilee, the high priest, and his officials. However, no one appeared at the appointed time, something he saw as a sign of disrespect towards his authority and the Roman government. Days later, the high priest visited him, claiming that his religion did not allow him to sit at a table with Romans. But Pilate saw through his false words and immediately knew there was opposition against him. The letter then delves into accounts of Jesus. Pilate explains that, at first, he was suspicious of Jesus' intentions, but soon realized he was not an agitator. On the contrary, Jesus seemed more inclined toward the Romans than the Jews. Once Pilate saw him speaking to a large crowd and sent his secretary to listen to what Jesus was saying. Upon receiving the report, Pilate was impressed by the wisdom of his words, comparing them to those of the greatest philosophers, and decided not to interfere with his teachings. The account continues with Pilate mentioning how Jesus faced opposition from the wealthier and more powerful Jews, particularly the scribes and Pharisees, whom he called hypocrites. Pilate, however, admired Jesus' courage in speaking against the local leaders. He describes how Jesus' presence was striking and how, even in the face of threats, he remained calm and serene. Pilate also recounts his personal conversation with Jesus, where he offered protection to the Nazarene, but Jesus calmly replied that true refuge was in the heavens. The governor then explains how, over time, the pressure to condemn Jesus grew, leading to his crucifixion. In the end, Pilate describes how, after Jesus' death, the tomb was found empty, and the disciples began proclaiming that he had risen, causing even more unrest in the city. Pilate concludes the letter by stating that he thoroughly investigated the events and that the resurrection, though shrouded in mystery, was reported by many. He ends by offering himself to the emperor for any additional clarification. After the discovery of the empty tomb, the situation in Jerusalem became even more chaotic. Pilate reports that rumors about Jesus' resurrection spread quickly. People spoke of the miracles Jesus had performed during his lifetime, such as turning water into wine, healing the sick, and even raising the dead. And now there were those claiming that he himself had risen from the dead. Pilate writes to the emperor, "Your Majesty, when I received news that Jesus' body had disappeared, I immediately sent men to investigate what had happened. Some guards, who were responsible for watching over the tomb, reported that during the early morning, a bright light appeared over the sepulchre. At first, they thought it was women coming to embalm the body, but then something inexplicable happened. The ground began to shake, and they were overcome with deep fear. When they regained consciousness, Jesus' body was no longer there." The governor then recounts how, despite all the security measures taken, including placing Roman and Jewish guards around the tomb. The body had inexplicably vanished. Even more troubling was the fact that many of the soldiers, terrified by what they had witnessed, refused to lie about what had happened, even when bribed by the priests. These men preferred to face any punishment rather than deny what their eyes had seen. They claimed it was as if the heavens had descended to earth at that moment. Pilate mentions that one of the Jewish priests suggested that the disciples had stolen the body to stage the resurrection, but Pilate himself doubted this version of events. While it was a convenient explanation for the priest, I knew that Jesus and his disciples did not have the means nor the boldness to carry out such a thing, especially under the watchful eyes of the guards placed there precisely to prevent such an incident. With the city on high alert, Pilate concludes his letter by mentioning the rumors circulating among the people, saying that Jesus was no ordinary man. Some believed he was more than just a prophet or spiritual leader, and that perhaps he was, in fact, a divine figure. Pilate, though skeptical, admits that the extraordinary events he witnessed during that period left him deeply impressed. He writes to the emperor, "I cannot say with certainty what truly happened, but I feel that the Kaiser or some higher power were involved in the recent days." Pilate finishes his letter with a reflective tone, commenting on the impact Jesus had not only on Judea, but also on the Roman government itself. He admits that despite having done everything in his power to maintain order and peace, something much greater seemed to be at play. "Your Majesty, the days I lived in Jerusalem were filled with mysteries and events that I believe will resonate for many generations. The name of Jesus, regardless of what the priests or the people say, will not be easily forgotten." And it is with this observation that Pilate concludes his account, leaving Tiberius aware that the events in Jerusalem could not simply be classified as mere local revolts or isolated incidents. Something much deeper had occurred, something that he, as governor, could not fully understand. With the growing spread of the news about the resurrection, Jerusalem plunged into a state of spiritual fervor and political uncertainty. The crowds were divided between those who saw Jesus as the true Messiah and others who believed the rumors were fabrications by his disciples. Pilate, observing all this movement, writes about how tension in the city intensified. The streets of Jerusalem were filled with raised voices. On one side, those who believed that Jesus had truly risen from the dead. On the other, those who feared it was a silent rebellion forming. He continues to describe the impact that this belief in Jesus' return had not only among the Jews, but also among the Romans who witnessed the events. "Your Majesty, even my soldiers began whispering among themselves about the supernatural events that took place that morning. Many remember the eclipse that darkened the sky during the crucifixion and the earthquake that shook the city. For them, these were clear signs that something far beyond human comprehension was happening." While the religious leaders of the time tried to control what they saw as a potential threat to their power, Pilate reveals that he himself was divided. On the one hand, he was a Roman governor, a man of laws and orders, but on the other, he could not deny that something inexplicable had occurred. "In all my years of service, I have witnessed many riots, revolts, and incidents that challenged Roman authority. However, nothing compares to the feeling that overcame me during the days before and after Jesus' crucifixion. It was as if an invisible force was at play, one that neither the Romans nor the Jews could control." Pilate also mentions the growing number of testimonies about sightings of Jesus after his resurrection. "Your Majesty, the rumors about Jesus walking among the living began to spread with impressive speed. Many claim to have seen him in different parts of the city. Others say he appeared to his disciples, teaching them about the kingdom of heaven and giving them new directions." At this point, Pilate's letter touches on a key point: the reaction of the Roman Empire to these events. He shares his concerns about how the authorities in Rome would react to these rumors. "Your Majesty, I fear that the growth of this movement around Jesus could bring complications to Roman control over Judea. While some believe he is the promised Messiah, others see him as a direct threat to our presence here." Even with all these tensions, Pilate reaffirms that during his time of governance, Jesus was never an agitator. He mentions that Jesus seemed more interested in preaching about love, peace, and compassion than in leading revolts against Rome. "I never found in Jesus' words anything that represented a threat to our order. On the contrary, his messages always pointed to a kind of kingdom that was not of this world. However, that does not prevent his followers and his enemies from believing that he came to change the balance of power. Pilate concludes the letter reflecting on how, in the end, he was merely a pawn in something much larger. Your Majesty, despite all my efforts to maintain peace and order, I feel I was merely a witness to an event destined to happen. If Jesus was indeed the Son of God, as many believe, then his resurrection is an event that transcends politics and law. After reporting all of this, Pilate expresses a sort of resignation in his tone, accepting that no matter how hard he tried to control the situation, he was dealing with something far beyond his understanding. May the gods, or the one Jesus called Father, have mercy on us. This letter, with all its weight and mystery, offers us a unique glimpse into how even the highest authorities of the time were deeply impacted by the events surrounding Jesus. A report that goes beyond the mere words of the Gospels, showing the depth and mystery surrounding one of the most influential figures in history. If this story intrigued you, you won't want to miss the next video that's appearing on your screen right now. Discover more deep mysteries and unexpected revelations that could transform the way you see the world and spirituality. With the spread of these stories and testimonies, Pilate found himself in an even more delicate position. The governor, who initially treated Jesus as just another local preacher, now realized the depth and seriousness of the events unfolding before his eyes. Pilate continues describing in the letter how, after the resurrection, the city of Jerusalem was marked by even greater division. He mentions, "Your Majesty, people spoke about sightings of Jesus with such fervor that even the most skeptical began to question their beliefs. Those who followed him in life now proclaimed that he was more than just a prophet, but the Son of God, the one who came to redeem the world." Pilate also writes about the Jewish priests who were increasingly concerned about the growing movement around Jesus. They feared that the followers of the Nazarene could use the events of the resurrection as a means of revolt against their authority. The religious leaders, concerned about the influence Jesus could continue to exert, began spreading stories to discredit the resurrection. They said his disciples stole the body and invented this whole narrative. But even among them, there were those who believed that something supernatural had occurred. The governor reflects on the conversations he had with influential people in Jerusalem, including some who, secretly, were beginning to believe the stories about Jesus. He describes how fear and hope coexisted on all sides. There was a mixture of reverence and dread. Those who had seen Jesus' miracles in life could not ignore the signs, while the powerful feared losing control over the people. The fear that something greater was at play hovered over everyone. Pilate also recalls the political pressure he received from Rome to maintain order, even in the face of such unusual events. Emperor Tiberius, though concerned about the events in Judea, still did not fully understand the long-term impact the resurrection would have. The orders coming from Rome were clear: keep the peace and prevent revolts. But how do you prevent a spiritual revolt, a revolution of hearts and minds? We were facing something unprecedented. He goes on to describe how the presence of Jesus after his resurrection became more than just a local rumor. Reports began to come from distant places. It wasn't only in Jerusalem that they spoke of him. In neighboring cities, remote villages, and even among the Romans, stories were heard that the Nazarene had conquered death. The news traveled faster than any messenger. It was as if the very wind carried these words. Pilate mentions that the situation began to take a new direction when some Roman soldiers, who had previously been indifferent, started to believe the stories they were hearing. Some of my own men, those who were assigned to guard the tomb, confessed that they felt a divine presence that day. One of them told me he had never experienced so much fear and awe at the same time. To him, what happened at the tomb was proof that Jesus was, in fact, a being of another nature. The governor, recognizing that he was dealing with something far beyond Roman power, ends his letter with a tone of resignation and reverence. He admits that despite all his efforts to contain what seemed to be a mere religious agitation, it was clear that something much larger was at play. Your Majesty, I am not a man of superstitions. I have always believed that Rome's power was absolute. But the events I witnessed and what I have heard from all corners make me believe we are facing something much greater. Perhaps the boss or some divine force are truly among us. Pilate concludes with one final reflection on Jesus' lasting impact. He foresees that even if the movement is temporarily suppressed, the name of Jesus will never be forgotten. Even if we manage to silence his followers for a time, we cannot erase what happened here. Jesus' words, his miracles, and most impressively, his resurrection, will continue to echo. Perhaps, Your Majesty, we are witnessing the birth of something that not even the power of Rome will be able to control. And thus ends Pilate's remarkable letter, an account that gives us an intimate perspective on how one of the greatest empires in the world was shaken by a man who, in life, preached simplicity, love, and peace, but whose presence would reverberate for millennia. Now, to continue diving into this world of mysteries and revelations, click on the video that's appearing on your screen. Let's explore even more of these incredible stories that could transform the way we see spirituality in the world around us. At the end of this video, you had the chance to explore teachings that may transform your view of Jesus and the true purpose of your life. But the journey doesn't end here. Each time you revisit these ideas, something new can emerge, a new connection, a new understanding, a new perspective that could change everything around you. Have you ever thought about how these teachings can directly impact the challenges you face today? How applying this ancient wisdom can bring clarity to moments when you feel lost or without direction? This video is not just about knowledge, but about how it can illuminate your spiritual and personal path, helping you grow in ways you might not have yet realized. If these questions have sparked something in you, if you feel there is more to be discovered, watch again. Every time you return to this content, you get a little closer to a greater truth. Jesus' wisdom still has much to reveal, and it is ready to transform your life.